Welcome back to episode 8 of Wyandot Lake, our Planet Coaster to water park. Today is going to be a fun day as we continue work on Lakeside with some decorations and scenery that's really going to kind of pull the area together. So without delay, let's go ahead and dive on in. The first thing that we are going to work on is lighting for the area. We want the water park to be open at night, but of course we need safety in mind, which means that we need to make sure that the guards can see the pools and the people within the pools when it is dark out, and of course obviously on the pathways as well, which is why these are going to be double-sided poles. So let's kind of talk about the lights we went with, because I thought about for a while and I ended up deciding to kind of go with this stadium-esque lighting look. The reason being is it's just the most efficient, and what I kind of envisioned is like one of these areas where you have all these lights that kind of light everything up, and then they've got kind of the wires kind of running from pole to pole. We obviously didn't put wires connecting them. We don't really have anything like that. I guess we could have used rope, but I just felt extra and cluttery. And I'm not really a huge fan of projects in general that have above ground utilities, and so I left it as is, just because I think I don't know, it just didn't feel like it was right, and so we ended up not doing that, and just kind of sticking with what we had instead. We ended up doing wood, and the reason we did that was for a couple reasons. First, it kind of gives it that older feel, which I kind of want this area to have, right? You know, lakes aren't always easy to get to. They can be kind of difficult to kind of get to lakes and get there for maintenance and construction. And so I kind of wanted it to feel like, you know, maybe these were installed, back in like the 60s, or the 70s or whatever. And, you know, they've got modern lights on them, but the poles are still original, right? Because it's just not realistic to come in and put in new poles, because you know the wood poles work kind of like your maybe your local little league complex kind of thing. So that's why that's one of the reasons we went with it. The second one is because as we add the foliage kind of around it, especially in between Lakeside and the main path, you're gonna see that it's kind of a foresty look, kind of right there at the top of your screen, that kind of green area. And, you know, forests are tree trunks. And so the wood that we went with is that kind of tree trunk, I forget what its name, but it's, you know, basically a tree trunk look. And so it kind of gives off the idea that these light poles maybe aren't lights, but they're trees. So that if you don't look up, you just kind of think it's another tree, and you don't realize that it's light, and so it kind of adds into the immersion. And you can see there where I looked at doing the rope, and it just didn't look right. So we did dress the poles up a little bit. We put these little ropes on them, which came out super cool. It was kind of one of those things where it was like, oh man, wish I had thought of this before copying and pasting this around everywhere, because I think I even at one point looked at making the poles even taller, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm not going through and adding height to all these. That's just not happening, because the ropes took long enough as was. But yeah, so it kind of helps describe it as trees, which also kind of plays into the storyline of kind of it being less modern, than it was. So I really like that, and I really did want it to kind of have the ability to swim at night. I think swimming at night is such a cool thing. I remember kind of going to the water park when I was in elementary school, and you know, we would do night swims every I think it was like every Friday you could night swim at the local pool, and it was just always so much fun kind of being in there with the lights, and it was such a different feel, and it just felt like so much fun. And so I'm super happy with how it turned off, because it kind of, when you go into first person, kind of gives me the same feel. And then the other one is when I worked at pools, and I would leave at night. You'd work open to close 12 hours, and you would just be exhausted, and you wanted to go home. And there was just something about walking through the pool at night and seeing it all lit up, and nobody around. That just was so peaceful and just relaxing. And especially after a really busy, chaotic day. That's really something I loved with every job I've had, is just kind of taking some time at the end of a really busy day to just kind of relax and say, man, that was a busy day, but that was a fun day. Right now, we're going to work on this fencing. Something I want to try more of in Planet Coaster 2 that I didn't really do when I played Planet Coaster 1. And I never recorded anything with Planet Coaster 1, but was custom fencing. I really kind of stuck to the fencing in the game. And I think especially with the scaling, it just makes it so much easier to do. And so I really want to play around with the different assets that are in the game now to kind of create these kind of custom fences that just look really well. My original thought with this area where this fence is going in was this was going to be that infinity pool, where it was gonna like kind of be straight down, and it just doesn't work. You can't place water directly against a pool. And so instead what we'll end up doing is we'll kind of slope this down eventually. But originally my thought was you could kind of swim right up to this. You could look over, the fence here and right into it. Unfortunately, it ended up being a little bit of a small separation just because of the foliage that we put in here and how we slope it down. But I actually think that works out better. I'm not really sure having the infinity pool would be super realistic. The reason being is, if you don't know, water features that you can access that publicly, right? That you can dip your hand into or whatever, like fountains at your mall or pools or whatever it may be. They all have to be chlorinated. I think oftentimes we think of chlorination, we think of just the pools, but no, it really is a ton of stuff, right? That fountain. And so as I kind of went through this, I was kind of like, I'm actually not sure that you would be able to have an infinity pool, because you would have to chlorinate the lake, purely because what happens, if there's an overflow or it's really windy and water rolls up into the pool, you'd have unchlorinated water contaminating chlorinated water, and that unchlorinated water, could have fish in there possibly, right? And I'm not saying that the lake in this has fish, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it could have all kinds of parasites or little bacteria that could contaminate, and all of a sudden you have to drain the pool, and this giant lake that's probably going to account for a quarter of the business is going to have to close. And so that was just something that I was like, that really ends up kind of working out okay. And with the foliage, it didn't really matter. The poles on the bottom of the fence actually are too big and are perfectly in the sight line, so you can't even see the water. But with the foliage that's next to it, it actually was kind of like, it's whatever. Not upset about it. I think it looks great when it's done. Wasn't what I originally thought, but I think that's one of the great things that's about design. It is sometimes you have this great vision in your head and what something's going to look like, and then all of a sudden you go in and you develop it, you build it, and it comes out different. Sometimes it's just not what you originally thought it was going to look like. Sometimes it's you have to make the change during construction, and so instead of being what you wanted it to look like, it looks like something else. and sometimes it looks out better, which I think is kind of the case of what we saw here. And so I'm kind of okay with it. Eventually, if we want to, we could come back with the glass pieces in the games now. We could come back and maybe make a glass wall and do a true infinity pool if we can figure out a way to make that happen. But for right now, I'm actually very happy with how it came out. And so let's talk a little bit about the sign. So I wanted something that looked a little more worn down, kind of that. I think you think of Disney and kind of the Radiator Spring signs, and that was kind of the sign, that kind of the feel that I was looking for, right? Kind of something a little more worn down, kind of billboard-esque, kind of, it's the side of the road. And so that's kind of what we went through here. It's a little more of a pastel color palette, which looks great. And then we put these like little wooden signs on top, kind of saying, hey, we're open for the summer. So kind of almost this, you're coming through at like middle of May, late May, and the lake's now open, and you're maybe not sure, and maybe their tourism isn't doing so great, and so they've got these little signs just so you're like, oh my gosh, you see it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's open, we should stop. And so that's kind of what we went with there. And then, at the end of the year, of course, they can come by and they can kind of grab those off. It's, just kind of nailed in there or hooked in there somehow, and they take it off. And so that's kind of the look I was going for. And it really came out well. And then, we added this little kind of free admission sign at the bottom, just because, another marketing thing, another thing where you're driving by and you're like, the lake's kind of cool, but probably have to buy, oh no, it's free. We totally need to stop. And, it's just kind of a way to try to kind of get you in there. And of course, kind of mentioning kind of what all it's got. It's got restaurants, it's got shops, water slides, and then, the hours and everything. And, and I don't even know if those are technically really even the hours of what the park would be or anything. But, it just looks great, and kind of that artificial kind of theming element, which I really love. And then I also really like kind of the cloud and the sun. The sun is, it's the morning, and then the cloud, you got that sunset, orange kind of look to it, which says, oh, morning to sunset, which is really, I think just fits super, super well in there. I love how it looks. So we're going to put them on both ends, so both sides, no matter how you enter, it'll put in there. And then, of course, we added a little lifeguard sign, and it just great. Just came out great. You will see, so the color palette here. So this is kind of the color palette. You see it on the slides in the background there as well as on here. And then you saw it a minute ago, kind of the big squares on the ground. So that's our color palette for the area. Right there, you kind of saw it for a second. And the way I do my colors is I kind of just look up and just kind of say, what am I really feeling for this area? And so, I'll just kind of Google search and just kind of say, lake color palette or forest color palette, or kind of whatever I'm really kind of feeling for the storyline. And, I'll kind of scroll through the images, see what kind of there is. A lot of times you will have, some that are really cool, and then maybe this color works in the game, this color doesn't, and so you kind of pick and choose. And so I don't really have like a set color palette that I used. I kind of pulled from 3 or 4 different ones, and I kind of just created that square there just so it was an easy reference point, which is something you'll kind of see me do throughout with kind of all the areas we do. Although the next area that we are going to work on, which if you have any guesses for what the next themed area is going to be, drop it below. We've got one more episode of Lakeside after this, and then we're to the next area, so let me know what you think it is. But that's got a little bit of a kind of all over the place color palette compared to this one. But yeah, that's kind of how we do our coloring. And then of course we've got to get our fencing in here. Something that I did kind of go with Planet Coaster color or fencing here, but something that I really liked is our fencing along the main pathway here, and I think we get to it here in a second. It's different from inside the themed area. And you're going to kind of see that with all of our themed areas, just because it really kind of highlights the different areas and kind of the theming. I think we even maybe go in eventually and change this path. Right now it's the same path as kind of our main kind of throughway path. And I think we actually changed it so it kind of is a little more of a transitional path that kind of is a little more designed, or defined, I should say, which looks super cool. So on the pathing, I absolutely love the pathing in this game. And with the new update, the circle path is just awesome. The only thing, and I have seen this out there, so I'm hoping that Frontier makes a change, because I know that they've been listening to kind of what people say, is I wish the stamp tool you could get smaller, especially with the circular stamp tool, so that you could have just these really small stamps with your tree trunk or whatever in there. So hopefully we see that at some point. But I just love the pathing, and something that you'll see here in about 5 or 6 seconds is we're going to actually change the pathing color here. We had originally gone with this kind of pine needle floor look, and it just, I don't know, it just looked kind of rusted, and yeah, here we go. You can see where we kind of defined that, but it just wasn't great. So we ended up going in and putting in this blue kind of lake color. I think that's actually what I looked up, is kind of like lake color palette, and so it just kind of goes to it, and then like we kind of define this area a little bit differently. This ends up being brick, you see right there, to kind of define the different areas, and to be able to kind of move it around like this is just super awesome. I really love the way it came out. And then the reserved areas over here, so you've got the little brick, and then you've got the wood path over there. You know, those are both areas that I guess I kind of imagine being areas that can be reserved. You know, off to the side there is going to be you know, kind of that adult only, and then over here we're going to have kind of that cabana, and we'll actually go in eventually and kind of put in some ropes that kind of help define the area for the cabanas. So it's kind of like, not only are the cabanas reserved, but there's like a little attendant there, and you can't even get back here unless you are reserving a cabana and have a cabana. And so that is something that I just turns out really well. And I am still waiting on Frontier to give us the ability to make all fences barriers, because that would be great there. But overall, it just looks super great. So the last thing we're going to do today is just a little bit of work on this backstage area. Everything will be fenced, right? So you know, there'll be foliage in front of the fence, so you really can't see the fence. The fence is more so to stop people from you know, climbing back here and getting backstage because they climb through the foliage, or you know, if a tree dies and has to come down, you can't see backstage. That's kind of more what the fencing is for. I will say I do feel like I kind of neglected the backstage area of this park when building it, at least this part. So I am going to go back and kind of add some things here in, and then we will also go back later on and do that. This is the office area. I kind of don't have space to put a road kind of from the parking lot back here, but I think that's fine, because I don't think a lot of times from the main parking lot you can access the back areas, the administrative areas. You know, generally there's it's kind of a little more secure. They've got maybe a different kind of more discreet entrance that they come in. So we might try to make one fit at some point, but for right now we're going to kind of leave it as is. But we'll work on this, and then in the next episode we'll kind of put the foliage in. So tomorrow's episode, I think I said earlier that this is the penultimate episode. That is a lie. Tomorrow's episode is actually the penultimate episode for Lakeside, before we kind of move on to our next themed area. We're going to spend a good portion of the episode building out the lake, which Of course, we're going to call Wyandot Lake, and then getting all of our fencing and everything kind of set up before we work on our foliage, making the area really, really come to life. It's really kind of incredible to see how the area looks now compared to what it looks like when it's completely done, once we kind of get the foliage in. Which is just super cool, and we do kind of some stuff with depth, which just looks awesome. So super excited to see that. Yeah, so we'll get all our fencing and foliage in. I think it comes out really well. I'm excited for you all to see it tomorrow. But for now, though, that's all I've got. So if you haven't already and you've watched all 8 episodes so far, please take a moment to like, subscribe. If you enjoyed it, but you haven't watched the last 7 episodes before today, go back and check them out. Drop a comment. What do you think the next themed area is going to be? And then enjoy the last 30-40 seconds here, and we will see you tomorrow.